My first podcast. My first book. My first 2,100 words about my detainment. My first time sharing how I got detained. I'm going to read my chapter to you. So here we go. Lessons from behind bars. Does carbon dioxide poisoning hurt? How long before you pass from carbon dioxide inhalation? How long can a car idle with a quarter tank of gas? What are the chances of living when one is exposed to carbon dioxide? How many sleeping pills do you need to take before you die in your sleep? All of the above can be found in my Google search history. There are others here and there about train impacts, but they were always tainted by the thoughts that some poor innocent train driver would be shattered thinking they had taken a life, and not realizing that they took the life of what that was well lived, and the person, meaning me, simply wanted out on a good note. Though it may be hard to believe, I can be a bit of a Pollyanna. My exit was always painted in my mind as coming after a life well lived, with humans impacted positively and amazing experiences and memories collected. It would happen when it was, in my eyes, just time to depart. Let me share how my desire to leave this world would land me behind bars for 295 days. Yes, imagine wanting to die only to be put in handcuffs and removed from what you knew to be home. There's a whole conversation we could have around systems and how ill-equipped they are to deal with so many human factors, but I won't go into that here. On September 7th, 2017, I wrote a beautiful Facebook post about my life, some of the amazing experiences and great friendships I've had. More importantly, I wrote about how over the past 13 months, I'd come to love in a way I never believed possible, thanks to a newborn baby I was fostering while her mother worked to get clean from opiates. The post concluded with, I won't commit suicide after all, because no one could properly tell Popo, which was my nickname for the baby, how much I love her. Though I had clearly stated I would not do anything to myself, my post, like so many others, were skimmed and misconstrued. The takeaway? Cheryl suicidal. Truthfully, I was-ish. However, I had talked myself out of it, for that moment, at least. I don't blame my friends for their fear. A few even called in well checks for me. And though I am grateful and know they were only doing what they knew to do at the time, those well checks definitely sent me into a tailspin. The rap at the door, the peek through the peephole, and seeing 3 officers confused me. I had no idea they were there for me. When I opened the door, I was asked to identify myself and step outside. When I did, I was asked if I was okay, to which I responded with, yes, I'm good. One thing led to another quickly. Before I knew it, I was asked to come with them for a record check. Coming with them involved handcuffs, a backseat of a police car, and being put into a cell until paperwork could be sorted, understood, and dealt with. Coming with them would be the last time I would see my home, my material possessions, the baby I had come to love. Coming with them would mean no contact with friends for 295 days. Coming with them led me to this. I had never been in handcuffs before. I had never had any run-in with the law. I had never had anxiety attack like this before either. Let me tell you, putting a 5'10" girl who weighed close to 200 pounds at the time into a police car is no easy task. Now, when I watch TV shows about officers and detainment, those limber humans who can kick and scream and wiggle around in the back seats have my utmost respect. It took everything in me to fill my lungs in those moments to keep sitting up straight, let alone the knee bruises I was getting, the cuff marks from my back pushed into the seat with my hands and arms in between. The Mesa, Arizona police station was my first stop. Then was the famous 4th Avenue jail, was my next stop. This is where I was asked my citizenship, proof of my stay in the United States, and when I knew I was in fact going to struggle with the immigration department. After a court date was set to sort out paperwork, I was released on my own recognizance. A second later, however, just as one set of cuffs came off, another set went on. The second set belonged to the United States immigration officers. Oh, the stories I could write about 4th Avenue Jail. The stories I could write about those struggling with addiction and how the jail scene was like a Girl Scout meeting. They all knew one another in some fashion or another, whether personally or by association, or even by street corner. I was completely out of my element. I watched and listened without moving a muscle. It was my first taste of knowing what a privileged life I had had. Here's a snapshot of my journey with the American penal system. Police car to the Mesa Police Department, the 4th Avenue Jail, Phoenix Immigration Office, Florence Detainment Center, Phoenix Immigration Office, Eloy Detainment Center, all within 96 hours. In November, I went from Eloy Detention Center to 4th Avenue Jail, to Australia Jail, to the Phoenix Immigration Office, to Florence Detainment Center, and then back to Eloy. In June of 2018, I was shifted from Eloy Detainment Center to Albany, New York, and eventually released at the Niagara Canadian border back into Canada. Jail entertainment is like being immersed in a new country for the first time. There is a whole new lingo and a whole new set of laws and rules. But the governing body is not made up of those elected or paid to be there, but your fellow detainees. Sure, there are some powers afforded to those employed by the places, but for the most part, the rules and laws and expectations are absolutely set by those in the same clothing and uniforms I was wearing. Kites? What is a kite? Lockdown? What does that mean? Shakedown? What is this, a dance move? Pat down? Why? What is worth stealing in these places? Now take into account that 85% of the people in Eloy were Hispanic and only 10% of them bilingual, and you can see that for sure I was a minority, not only in terms of language and skin tone, but life experience. But oh, what I learned, and can even say accomplished. Do not tell me white privilege doesn't exist, because I've lived it. I was addressed differently by the guards. I was afforded privileges some would never see, all because of my skin color and language. I also learned a great deal about what is valued depending on where we are in the world. For example, in the United States, book education is more valued by those in power than street knowledge or farming. I've always had pen, paper, and scissors at my disposal. If I decided to make something, I had the tools to craft it. Without those tools, however, I was powerless. Many of the women from Guatemala and other South American countries, however, had to learn to use their hands and whatever items were readily available to them. Give them a ramen noodle package, and in no time, they would fold it up, heat water to work it, and then present an amazing necklace, bracelet, or bookmark. We were in the United States, holding them to standards they weren't aware of, standards they didn't understand. This was one of the biggest lessons I learned while detained. We spoke to them in English. They didn't understand. We used words that their informal or street knowledge may have never taught them. We used terms they didn't know. Expected their routines for hygiene, eating, dressing, sleeping to be like ours. Yet when I paused long enough to learn about them and hear their stories, I realized these ladies knew a passion I would possibly never experience. A passion for living, working, and community. They knew a resilience beyond my comprehension. They knew a hope I could not grasp. I met ladies whose feet, they're torched so they could not run from those abusing them. I met ladies who'd lost family members to cartels, gangs, and corrupt leaders. I met ladies who could share story after story of what you and I would consider torture, abuse, and hardships, yet they called it life. I met ladies who were willing to walk thousands of miles looking for hope and believing it existed, regardless of what they knew and had experienced. One planet, one team. I met ladies who smiled and were grateful for running water. I met ladies who were excited to have a TV and a microwave available. I met ladies who rallied around one struggling and believed in community. All of the above are among what I would call the fresh border crossers. Then there are the stories of those who, like me, had been in the United States for years upon years and then found themselves detained, thinking life as they knew it was over. Many knew of no other country, having been brought over to the United States as infants, and were facing deportation and separation from their families, homes, and loved ones because of a lack of papers. I at least knew I was going to be returned to a safe country. Some were being sent to war-torn Congo, others to the depths of Mexico, others back to India to be placed in submissive experiences. These ladies were often there because of a call or a poor choice, meaning they called the police for help during a domestic violence situation, and here they were detained. In my case, it was that Facebook post saying I was tired and I had a great life and it was time to exit led me to being there. Yes, I was good enough to foster a newborn and run a business all those years, but apparently I did not meet the requirements to stay in my home. What were my biggest lessons? Community is where you are and is always buildable. Those who have been detained remain connected, and we're there for one another, even after our release. Some of you may call this trauma bond, and rightfully so. Regardless, it's a bond that sustains, supports, uplifts, and is deeper than most will ever experience or allow themselves to experience. For don't we all go into friendships somewhat guarded? You adapt. The goal of steak on the barbecue every night shifted to praying for boiled eggs in the morning. You learn to adapt and set your sights on what is attainable and within your reach. You learn to cheer for seemingly small victories when the large ones can't be found. You adapt. Energy is contagious. That you can do it attitude changed my living experience behind bars. Being an encourager brought me encouragement. Your voice matters. Many feared the authorities and were taught to respect it at all costs and at all times. Empowering advocacy for oneself was a big part of my journey. We, in North America, have a voice and we use it. Teaching others that it was okay to question, it was okay to say no, it was okay to ask, and it was okay to pause was eye-opening. Holding people to what you know is not fair. Asking the ladies for medical records to prove their torture, asking mothers for copies of their children's birth certificates to prove that the children were theirs, asking ladies for proof of housing and travel. You get the picture. We were expecting and asking them for things they simply could not produce, didn't have, and didn't understand. Meet people where they're at. See the journey. Often we see a choice, a decision, one step of where someone is at and what they have done. We base perceptions on this moment, even judgments. There are many steps that led them to that moment. There are many steps taken since that moment as well. See the journey, not just the step. We see the slip, the stumble. We don't understand it because we're not in their shoes, and yet we focus on it and hold them there in our minds. Now, I am not advocating illegal entry whatsoever. However, I am saying understand the journey and help rather than judge. Oh, the book inside of me. One day. All of this may have you wondering where I am today. I am in Ontario, Canada. I have reconnected with many of my amazing American friends, and thanks to my detainment, I also now have friends pretty much worldwide. It is my hope to get to Mexico soon to hug on those who shared in this experience with me. We are in it together. Holds new meaning for many of us and rings so true. Time, distance, country, language, education, skin tone, they're all just excuses for lack of unity. When you get rid of all the excuses, what do you find? What do you find? Same planet, same team. Led me to this. May our stories change your perception. Thanks for being here, and I hope you've subscribed to the podcast and watch future episodes.